This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abu-Al-Samid.
Welcome to episode 37. So we've got a fun Honda-centric episode for everybody. I think you drove everything.
It's the way things work out sometimes.
Yeah. So, Sam, in terms of what you've been driving this week, you had a couple of things. So let's tee that up, and we'll talk about that first.
Yeah, so last week I was scheduled to have the Acura MDX Sport Hybrid, which is the newest variant of the MDX that showed up. And usually when we get these loans, it's usually for a week. And I got this one last Monday. But as it turns out, I got a note from my friendly local Honda PR rep late on Thursday afternoon saying, "Hey Sam, we can get you into an NSX for the weekend if that's okay." And
no, not at all. Nope, I don't want it. Nope.
Needless to say, I said yes. So the next morning we swapped the MDX for the NSX, and I drove that around for a couple of days. So it was a good week of Honda hybrids.
Yeah, I mean they're kind of like the same thing, right? Like the MDX and they're both hybrids. They're both, yeah. I mean.
Yeah, they both have Acura badges,
right?
They have steering wheels, 4 wheels on the ground, four rubber wheels with aluminum, alloy wheels. So, what more could you ask for? And they have a V6 engine and 3 electric motors.
Yeah, see, they're the exact same thing.
Sure, absolutely. Well, actually, they're actually more alike than you would think in some ways, because. The Acura Sport Hybrid system actually originated on the RLX, which I think Acura has sold,
3 or 4,
60 up over the last 3 or 4 years. It's unfortunately it has not been widely adopted.
That car is rare enough that I still see them and go, "What the heck is that?" Oh yeah.
So when it came out on the RLX a couple of years ago, the Sport Hybrid package, what they did was they have a 3-liter version of the Honda V6 corporate V6 paired with a 7-speed DCT dual clutch transmission. In between the clutch or in between the transmission and the engine, you will find an electric motor that generates I believe it was 54 horsepower, something like that. I can't remember again. Let's see. The front motor, 47 horsepower, and then a pair of 36 horsepower motors at the rear axle in the RLX version, one driving each of the rear wheels. So since they can be operated independently, they can do some torque vectoring with that and do the Acura super handling all-wheel drive system via the electric motors at the rear. So what they did when they did the NSX, back in 2012 or so, 2012, when we first saw it was 2011, when we first saw the concept of what would become the production NSX. At that time, they showed it with a normally aspirated V6 in the back and just the 2 electric motors driving the front wheels. Over the course of the next 4 years, it evolved somewhat. They added in a 3rd electric motor and a pair of turbochargers to the V6 engine to get what we have today for the production version of that. And it turns out it's the same 3 electric motors that are on the RLX and also on the MDX.
I mean, why mess with a good thing, right?
Exactly. So in the case of the NSX, they swapped directions. So the 2 motors are at the front axle driving the front wheels, the 47 horsepower motors at the rear, and then at the in the back, along with that, you have a 500 horsepower twin turbocharged V6 engine. So altogether, combined, works out to about 573 horsepower.
Yeah, I mean it's just what you need for a practical weekend of shopping at the big box store and groceries, right?
Yeah, as long as you bring somebody else along with an MDX,
right.
You put all the stuff in and drive it home.
So, I mean, the big question, though, is like, does the NSX live up to, that's always sort of been the criticism, or at least my criticism was like, the original was this attainable supercar that put all of the other Italian brands, right? It put Ferrari and Lamborghini on notice, like, hey guys, this is how it's going to be. We're going to make a car like yours that's as reliable and well made as our Accord, and you're going to either have to adapt or die. And seeing the new NSX, I'm kind of like, leaves me cold. And I don't know if maybe that's just because of where I'm at. I'm looking at the old car with nostalgia, because I heard that some of the knock on that car when it was new was that it was kind of clinical, kind of overly perfect, not passionate enough. So does the new NSX live up to the legend?
Well, having had the opportunity to actually have driven the original back in the day, it certainly, I would say it was some of the criticism of it being somewhat clinical, or maybe less passionate. Some of it was slightly deserved, but it did drive really well. And that engine, for its time, the 3-liter V6 they had in there for its time was a fantastic engine. It was an incredibly fast car for its day in the early 90s. And performed as well as anything from Italy or anywhere else, and as you said, it did force the rest of the exotic car industry, as it was known in those days, to adapt, and they did, and subsequently Ferraris and Lamborghinis and everything else generally became much better as cars. They became much more reliable. The ergonomics were not as quirky as they used to be. And they became much more modern vehicles. That said, it could also be argued that with progress, you may lose some of the ability to actually take advantage of the character of those cars that you had in those days. I think to some degree, all of these cars, they're phenomenally fast today, but you've lost some of, because they're so fast, you really can't take advantage of what they're capable of on the street anymore,
right?
Without getting into a lot of trouble. So, to a degree, the same thing applies to the new NSX. The new NSX is a car that, aside from the absence of cargo space, you actually can live with on a daily basis. I mean, it's a daily driver supercar. It's phenomenally fast, 0 to 60 in just over 3 seconds. I did have a chance to briefly drive one back in June, which I think we talked about a little bit, where, Honda did an event at Mile and Dragway near here, and to demonstrate the launch control system. And I ran something like an 11.3 second quarter mile at 122 miles an hour.
That's, yeah. I mean, the MDX should be about as quick.
Yeah. So like I said, the MDX is the one you have somebody drive that, to meet you wherever you're going to do your big box shopping, and you load all your stuff in there, and then you drive, take a long, scenic drive home, in the NSX while they go back and deliver the stuff to your house.
Yeah. So actually, a little side note, but I spent years, I'm still there on the Swedish Bricks listserv, and we had a guy on there who was into the turbo Volvos back in the day, and he worked at Honeywell, which makes turbochargers. And
they make very good ones too.
Yeah, they make excellent turbochargers. And so the engineers there, they're into racing, and so they had a little club of drag racers, and he came up with this thing called he called it like the $5 dyno or the $10 dyno. Basically, like, it's a correction factor gleaned over experience, and it's a set of like an equation. You plug in your numbers here, and we can essentially tell from your quarter mile run what kind of horsepower your engine is making. And over years of refining it, it was pretty accurate. One of the things he said was like, really fast cars, like like that NSX, could tow the MDX down the quarter mile and still be faster.
That would not surprise me at all.
Yeah.
This is the NSX is a fantastic car in virtually every respect. The funny thing is, though, like many very expensive cars, especially very low volume cars like this one, so far in a little bit over a year on sale here in the U.S., they've sold just under 600 of them in the U.S., but the plant only has a capacity of about 1,000 cars a year, and that's for global markets. I think about 700 or so are allocated for the U.S. market, with the rest being exported to Europe and Japan and elsewhere. So given that it's a low volume car, it's inherent that it's going to borrow some pieces from other more mainstream vehicles. And like I mentioned, the electric motors are the same ones that you'll find in the RLX and in the MDX, although obviously repurposed to the opposite axles. But one of the other things that's more obvious when you get in, if you've been in any relatively recent Honda Civic or a Fit or other recent Hondas, you'll immediately notice the audio head unit, which is exactly the same one that's in my wife's Civic hatchback, including the capacitive touch volume controls along the left-hand side of the screen. But that's fine. It's not bad. It's got a redundant volume control knob on the steering wheel spoke, so you can just as easily do it with that. Unlike the original NSX, there's no manual transmission available, so it's got the same mishmash push button switch gear shift mechanism that you find on the Pilot and the Ridgeline and also on the MDX, where you've got a circular push button for drive and manual mode, something that looks more or less like a power window switch for reverse, another push button for park. It's kind of an oddball design, but again, once you get the car started and you're moving, you never touch that again anyway, because you've got the aluminum paddles on the back of the steering wheel, and you just tap those, and the shifts happen instantaneously with the 9-speed DCT that's in this thing.
Well, yeah, and like that kind of shifter that wound up in those other cars reminded me of sort of the things that you'd see in exotics. I was looking at it in other stuff and going, okay, so they're trying to bring a little bit of like Lamborghini to the everyday sedan experience. Okay, fine. And so it makes sense that it's actually in something that can run with those other cars.
Yeah. And, and this thing can seriously run. I mean, it is way fast, but, it's also it's just really easy to drive, just as a daily driver. Even though it's very low, it's still relatively easy to get in and out of. The seats are really comfortable. The ride quality is surprisingly good. It's got MR dampers, the magneto-rheological dampers. So it's the hydraulic fluid within the dampers has a suspension of iron particles in there, and you pass an electric current through it, and it changes the viscosity of the fluid, which gives you instant continuous variability of the dampers. So driving around at low speed, around the neighborhood, going over the speed bumps, not a problem at all. As soon as you pick up speed and start bending it into corners, it just hustles. I mean, it's a fantastic car. Granted, it's because of its performance, you can't get anywhere near its limits, on public roads without attracting a lot of unwanted attention. And so, as much as I love driving cars like this, I increasingly as over the last few years, it's like I got to wonder why are we still bothering? I mean, who would want to own a car like this unless you actually have? But I guess if you have the money to buy a car like this, you can afford to take it to track days and really exercise it properly.
Yeah, I mean, and I hope that you would do that if you own this kind of car, because otherwise, why bother?
Yeah, well, I think that's the problem. That's the problem I have is I think most of the people that do own cars like this never do drive them the way they're meant to be driven.
It's sort of like the Corvette thing, right? And I was actually, I was telling my 9-year-old about this because he's playing Need for Speed, so he's into all the like hot rod cars. He wants to see a Mustang Boss 302 really badly. I'm like, no, that's just a GT. A Boss 302 is kind of a rare car. You're not going to see it on the street. But he's like, well, he's making a list of things he wants to drive, and one of them was like a Corvette. I was like, you're going to be able to find a Corvette like no problem.
Yeah.
It takes a while to buy them. Guys who are in their 40s and 50s buy their first Corvette. They drive it really slow and they keep it in the garage and it never sees rain. And that's too bad because they're so much fun when you drive them with a little bit of anger. But
oh yeah, and so so is the NSX. I mean, when you really push it, it's great. It's really a wonderful car to drive, and it remains just as it was 27 odd years ago. It's an everyday supercar. The thing is, all of them pretty much are everyday supercars now. But Honda just really they did a fantastic job on this.
Yeah, well, and I think that Honda definitely should just get the credit for kicking everybody into gear and saying, you got to make these things, maybe you remove a little passion when you make them so much more reliable than they had been. But on the other hand, you make them so that you can enjoy them every day. It's not an engine out service for every little thing every 2,000 miles. And that with the combination of Volkswagen buying Lamborghini, from the 27 years ago, it was a much different scene than it is now. So, I mean, the technology that's showcased in this car, I think, is a nice sort of continuum where it still continues to, it shares a name and it continues to push the envelope. The handoffs and everything is good between electric and conventional engine.
It's completely seamless. I mean, you never feel the engine. The only clue that you have that the engine is shutting off, and switching to electric is just the sound goes away. And the sound, this engine does make a fantastic sound.
You mean they're not piping it in through the stereo?
No, it's all coming from outside, or at least it seems that way. And it's got a really nice growl to it. So it's very enjoyable to drive. But when it goes into electric mode, and the car has selectable drive modes. So you've got normal mode, sport, track, and there's a quiet mode, which basically when you switch it to quiet mode, when you're going through your neighborhood, if you don't want to piss off your neighbors, if you've got some juice in the battery, you can put it in quiet mode, and basically it just forces it into EV mode. Or if you're coming in late, you can do that so that you don't get everybody upset.
Wow.
But other than that, you'll never really feel it. You never feel the engine, engaging or disengaging. It's just all seamless, and you step on it and it just goes. It's got with all-wheel drive, it's got phenomenal traction. And that's a big part of why it does the quarter mile so well. Just like a Nissan GTR, it'll just go.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's being able to launch is key, and especially with electric motors too. Like that, and we've seen that from all the pointless 0 to 60 tests of Teslas and stuff. Is an electric car will just completely dominate a quarter mile.
But the thing is, you just you're never really going to use that in normal driving. So it just seems it almost it's I feel like a heretic saying this, but it seems wasteful. It feels so good when you do it.
I mean, sometimes a little bit of waste is a good thing.
Absolutely.
Like you gotta blow off some steam, move some electrons. I don't know what modern.
And this thing is actually, I drove it fairly briskly much of the weekend. Took my wife out to dinner in Chelsea, and we took a nice leisurely scenic drive back. Well, maybe not so leisurely, but a scenic drive back. And this thing, by the time I turned it back in, it had averaged, about 20 miles per gallon, which is pretty impressive for a car with this kind of performance.
Well, I mean, of course it had. Like that's the whole point of being. I guess it's not the whole point of being a hybrid. That's the thing that I think they're going to have to get over. Is like, yes, it's a hybrid, but understand that the hybrids, while they're great for efficiency, they're also great if you're making a high performance car.
Right, and I mean, this is obviously it gets very good fuel economy for a car of this performance level, but the hybrid system really is used to enhance the performance, to get you great off the line performance, and just, generally fill in the gaps. I mean, there's no, you never feel any turbo lag out of this thing. Obviously with a 500 horsepower V6, it's using fairly good sized turbos, to push that much air through it, but you never feel any lag when you step in it, because you've got those electric motors that come in and basically fill in the torque curve. So you get an absolutely seamless torque curve everywhere.
Yeah. And so in the supercar continuum, I suppose, the most direct analog I can make for the NSX is the Ford GT, and maybe that's not quite right. Maybe you can correct me on that. But
yeah, the GT, not having driven it, but based on what I know of the program and what drove that program, the GT really is more of a race car for the street. I mean, Ford built that car to win at Le Mans in the GT class. In the GT Pro class. That's why that car exists. And also, the usual about, it's a good way for us to try out some different materials, work with carbon fiber and Gorilla Glass and things like that. Well, fine, whatever. But it was built, it was built to win races, and it does that. And, the car that that a handful of people can buy, is really, it was designed as a race car first and then made into a street legal car.
Right. It's a homologation special.
Exactly. The NSX, on the other hand, is kind of the other way around. They built it as a showcase of what Honda could do, and they created a race car from it, for the GTD class, which is one step down from where the Ford GT runs. And it has also won in that class, and it's a very good car. But the rules in that class in GT don't allow for hybrids, so they actually run it with just the twin turbo V6 as a rear wheel drive car in GT3, and so. But it's it was designed as a road car first, and in terms of its everyday livability, the NSX is a car you can live with on a day-to-day basis. If you've ever looked at the cabin of a Ford GT, it's very small. It's like a race car. They minimize the frontal area, and it's probably not a car you want to drive on a daily basis.
Well, maybe it is though. Maybe see, it depends on your personality.
It depends on your personality and where you live. If you happen to live adjacent to a racetrack, or some canyon, in the hills above Malibu, then maybe you do want to drive it on a daily basis. But it's definitely much more raw, and it's also much more expensive. I mean, a GT costs about 2.5 times as much as the NSX. The NSX I drove, the NSX starts at about $157,000. The one I drove was a loaded one with the carbon fiber package and the carbon ceramic brakes and everything, and it came to about $205,000.
Yeah. See, once cars sort of eclipse that $100,000 price barrier, I just lose all sense of like what I just know they're expensive, and I know the GT and the NSX are both expensive, and comparing them on price, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think some people will probably cross shop them. Perhaps some customers that applied to get a GT, because GT supplies are so much more limited. Some customers that couldn't get a Ford GT may opt for an NSX or a Lamborghini or an Audi R8 or a Ferrari. But I think they're very different. The two, the NSX and the GT, are very different cars in terms of their personality. And their performance levels are similar. The GT is a little bit faster, but overall their personalities are very different.
Yeah, and that's good. We need more different personalities in
Absolutely.
the auto world, which is a great,
which.
right. It's a great segue to talk about what I've been driving, which is not super.
Does it have personality though?
I mean, I guess, yeah. It's kind of like an underdog. I mean, it's a Mitsubishi Outlander GT, and I say underdog because, like, you know, it's like the Mitsubishi is the Rodney Dangerfield of our sort of automotive brand lineup right now in the U.S. It just they're a punchline, and they're not necessarily bad cars. They're just
Not necessarily good car.
right. They're just not as good as most of the competition, you know, like, and the Outlander GT is in this red hot category of sort of mid-size crossovers. Although I'm not actually sure whether I would say it's sort of like a compact, more like a Nissan Rogue. That I don't feel is quite a mid-size. But it's got a third row, sort of like the Rogue, but I think its third row is a little bit larger than the Rogue's. But it's just this weird sort of particular niche of vehicle that doesn't exist anywhere else. You know, the Outlander GT is its own kind of thing.
Well, I mean, looking at it, you know, looking at its proportions and everything, I would say if they're probably the closest analog to this thing is the Subaru Outback.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the
It looks more wagon like than SUV like.
Yeah, and both are ungainly. Can't even get the word out. And you know, the Outlander GT is the only trim level of this this is the best of the big Outlanders, because there's two actual Outlanders. There's the Outlander Sport, which is the smaller one, and then there's the Outlander GT that it's this big one. This is the best of the breed. It's got the V6 with the 6-speed auto, and the three rows of seats, and all the bells and whistles are sort of included in this version, except for it's a $33,000 car that's the top of its line with no factory nav. Makes no sense. But this year you get Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. So there's that.
Oh, well, that's a start.
Yeah. But it's not as good as the Outback at all. It like the Outback feels like it's been evolved with the times. The Outlander, and this isn't even on the GS platform anymore. It's been moved past that. It's on a newer platform from what I understand. Boy, does it feel like a car that was designed, you know, in the 90s. And they've, you know, some of the pieces were designed in the 90s, like the V6 that it's got. It's got the
Is it still a 3-liter?
It is. It's the 3-liter.
Same 3-liter that they used all those years ago?
Yeah, requires premium fuel and is very throaty and not all that powerful. I mean, it's 225 horsepower, so it's not terrible for 3 liters, but it's not great. But it's nice that it has a 6-speed auto. And, you know, I think my biggest complaint about that is just that it requires premium fuel to do something that, you know, other V6s don't.
Well, especially considering that it's not even turbocharged.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it would be better turbocharged. You know, and they could call it like the Outlander Evo. And just, you know, speaking of the Evo, it sort of picks up an evolution of the Evo's all-wheel drive system. It has SAWC, which is like super all-wheel control or something. It's got couplings where it can move torque front to back and vector side to side. It doesent
So what are you complaining about?
No, I mean, it's
like an NSX.
Well, right. I mean, it's exactly. It's
Side to side.
Right. It's a supercar. You know, so part of it is like you come into it with this perception and you're like, ugh, you know, like Mitsubishi, they really need, if they're serious about being in this market, the things that they need to upgrade are, you know, styling. The exterior styling's not so bad. They're pretty good at that. But interior materials and structural rigidity and you know, those two are just killers, especially in this segment that's getting so good. You're getting surrounded by, you know, vehicles that are really solid and really well tuned and handle great and, have all kinds of features and are packed with value because that's where the buyers are. So it's very competitive, and they're not exactly competitive. They do offer something a little bit more, sort of a little bit more unique, I guess, because they have 3 rows and they've got all-wheel drive and reasonably priced. And, some of the features like the touchscreen system that's new this year, even though it doesn't have nav, like I said, but if you're using CarPlay or Android Auto, you do have nav because it's on your device. So that's actually not that big a deal, I suppose. So overall, like they're just sort of one of those cars that, like, on paper they start to stack up, and then you drive it and you're like, okay, it's soft, it's relatively quiet, but it's also really numb steering wise. It's mushy with the suspension tuning. It's just not, it doesn't hold up to even something like, a Ford Escape. It feels like a damn sports car.
Yeah, I'm looking at the specs right now, and the 3-liter V6 in this thing puts out a mere 224 horsepower and 215 foot-pounds of torque, which, by 2017 standards is pretty bad. Especially,
but is it though? Like, that's the thing. Like, setting my expectations, I feel like we've gotten so used to really, really torquey 3-liter engines with turbos. Yeah. And this it's naturally aspirated. So I'm trying to think of another naturally aspirated 3-liter V6. The closest I can come is the 3.2-liter Pentastar off the top of my head. And I know that engine has at least 250 pound-feet of torque.
Yeah, I mean, most of the V6s, that are, naturally aspirated V6s that are out there, especially in the utility sector, are 3.5 liters or so, and, they're in the 290 to 300 horsepower range.
Yeah, but that's a little unfair, like, because they're a half liter up. I mean, you'd expect them to be. The Gulf is wide, but you'd still, I would expect a half liter more displacement to naturally equal a more output.
Right. Well, I mean, but the thing is, most of the competitors are, also available with, a 2-liter turbo, 4-cylinder, that puts out significantly more power and torque than this thing. And in a 3,600 pound vehicle, that's, if we go back 15 years, 224 horsepower and a 3,600 pound SUV would actually be pretty good.
Right. And it's not
just like you said, it feels like something that was designed in the 1990s, and looking at the specs, it still looks like something that was designed in the 90s.
And that's the thing, like, it's solidly mediocre, I guess is the best I can say. Like, it's soft, in terms of ride. It's relatively quiet until you make the V6 sort of do its thing, and then it's really throaty, and it's you hear the engine, and that's fine.
And no bite.
Yeah, I mean, it moves along. Like, we've gotten also programmed to expect this, like, super fast response from everything. I mean, it'll run to 60. I think Car and Driver ran it in about 7.6 seconds. I think.
Actually, that's not bad. That's
right.
I mean, anything under 8 seconds is actually, perfectly acceptable.
It's fine. Like, that's, again, solidly mediocre. It's fine. It doesn't feel sluggish, and the 6-speed auto is so much better than having a CVT. And it's still, like, it's not the most refined powertrain, but it's not the worst. And it's like, I don't mind the sound of the engine. It's okay. It's just it's a little throaty in the cabin for what you're getting. And it doesn't sound necessarily refined. It's a bit raspy. But whatever on that. The biggest area where it falls down is just, there's this, the steering's real numb. Body rolls there. It's not real rewarding to drive, and it doesn't have to be, I suppose, but against stuff like the Mazda CX-9, which is right in this price range, or maybe a little bit more expensive, depending on how you configure it, it's going to lose.
Actually, a loaded CX-9 can get quite a bit more expensive.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. A CX-9 with all the toys is going to be very pricey compared to this, but it's also going to feel like it's worth it. Where this doesn't, like, the interior surfaces and materials are again, they're 90s grade. They're just not not competitive. The numbers the Outlander GT puts up are fine. Like even just on paper, again, if you're buying a car based on the spreadsheet, it'll be a contender. Especially with the very attractive lease and financing offers that have kept, Mitsubishi around.
If you go out and test drive one of these and don't look at anything else and look at it just completely in isolation, it's a perfectly halfway decent vehicle.
Well, this is the thing. Like, it's hard to completely say, like, it's you can't really buy a piece of crap in the U.S. market anymore. And it's not a piece of crap. It's just not as good as everything else that I would sort of compare it to. But it's fine, and it has all-wheel drive at a price and 3 rows and a crossover at a price that is pretty compelling. And it's comfortable enough. The seats are comfy, and it has that cargo flexibility. If you're using all 3 rows, it's not the best because you've only got about 10 cubic feet of space. That's really tiny. Like, you should look for something a little bigger. I think it's the Equinox that got longer or larger, or was it the?
No, Equinox stayed about the same size, but it's only a 2-row.
I thought there was a 3-row version of that.
No, if you want 3-row and a Chevy utility, you got to go up to the Traverse.
No, that's expensive.
Yeah, and it's also significantly larger.
Yeah.
Probably the closest, from GM would actually be the Acadia.
Maybe it's the Acadia.
It's more the midsize. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's definitely got more than 10 cubic feet behind the 3rd row, I think.
Yeah, it's probably also costs more cubic dollars because it's a GMC. Transaction prices for GMCs tend to be higher. But either way, like, the closest sort of analog I can come up with, other than the Rogue, would be the Dodge Journey. And that's and it's I think derived from the same platform. Well, not anymore. I'm
okay. So, the Journey would be derived from the older Outlander platform.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, though, the Journey is like, and this actually, we had this Twitter chat last week, like me and like Ed Niedermeyer and a couple of others, like, why does the Journey actually exist anymore? And it's a solidly mediocre vehicle. It's good for families. It's got 3 rows. It's thoughtfully laid out. It's decent to drive. It's cheap to buy. I mean,
it's actually. I mean, as you said, it's by today's standards, it's somewhat mediocre, but it actually has gotten a lot better than it was when it first came out.
Oh yeah, the new interior is just good.
Last year, it's actually halfway decent.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it and you go, okay, this thing is built really. It's not built as well. When we were shopping for the Jeep, I really wanted a Durango because of the 3 rows, and there's a wide gulf in build quality between the Journey and the Durango. The Journey, you can look at it and go, okay, just sort of looking at how it's constructed, like it's built kind of cheaply. That's never going to change. The interior of the Journey is much better than the interior of the Outlander GT. Chrysler, one of the things they did once they got the infusion of cash from FCA was they did a bang-up job on the interior of just about everything, and that still holds up. It's nice inside. This is not as nice. You spend all your time in the interior, so I know I harp on it like that and sort of the user interface, but they're important because that's what you do every day in the car. So I think we've expended quite a bit of time on the Outlander GT for me to say, like, yeah, it's all right. I did get an Escape afterward, and like, you want to talk about something that goes down the road solid.
Oh yeah,
the Escape feels like it's got a lot more structural rigidity, I'll say, and it should. It's a smaller, shorter car. So again, it's not apples to apples, but anyway, let's talk about something else.
Okay.
The Hyundai Elantra GT Sport. You actually had a chance to drive it, and I just came off a week with the Elantra Sport, the sedan version of this. So I'm really interested to hear sort of what you thought about it. My take on the Elantra Sport was like, it's no GTI. How does the GT Sport stack up?
It's no GTI.
Yeah.
but I mean, it's good. It's a really good car, but no, it's not quite competitive with the GTI. Compared to the Elantra sedan, the GT Sport is, yet another incremental step forward for Hyundai. The styling is different, and it incorporates the latest iteration of Hyundai's fluidic sculpture design language. And last week when Hyundai did a local drive program here with the Elantra GT and the updated 2018 Sonata, which gets a refresh for this year. Both of them have this new, this updated grille design, which I found it was interesting. The description that we heard from Hyundai, it's an evolution of this hexagonal grille that they've been using for the last several years. And when you look at it, the bottom half of it, the lines are kind of curved inwards, and they described it as being inspired by the look. If you take molten metal, and pour it out, like molten steel, you're making steel, and when you pour it out of the cupola, the way that molten metal pours out of there, that's kind of the look that inspires the shape of the grille, and it actually does replicate that shape pretty well.
Really? Because I was going to call BS on that.
I think just from a purely visual standpoint,
okay,
it does replicate that shape.
All right. I mean, because I spend some time with designers and creative people, and that just sounds like bullshit.
All right. Well, anyway, so the Elantra GT is the latest iteration of the 5-door hatchback on the Elantra platform, and for this one, it has a multi-link rear suspension and a bunch of other updates compared to the sedans. It also has a new interior design, which I think will be translating into other Hyundais as they get updated over the next couple of years as well. So probably the next iteration of the sedan will get an interior that looks more like this one. Really nice materials. They've gone to the same kind of approach that a lot of other car companies have been doing recently, with moving the touchscreen up and basically standing it up on top of the dash, so kind of like a tablet sitting on top of the dashboard, which gets it closer to your line of sight, so you're not looking down so much when you glance over at the screen, which is a good thing. It's got proper rotary volume and tuning knobs and all that sort of thing. But the big thing is the way it drives. The one that I drove was 6-speed manual. They also have it with a 6-speed DCT. The GT Sport, all of them have the 1.6 liter turbo that you also find in the Sport sedan, as well as in the Veloster turbo and the Kia Forte SX and some other models, which is a really nice engine. Got plenty of power and torque, very responsive engine. The 6-speed manual is slick shifting, is very little effort, almost too little effort when you're shifting it. And it's actually, if you tap it, it's actually pretty easy to pop it into neutral when it's in gear. If you give it a whack, if you're flailing your arms around it all. But other than that, that part of it is really, really good. The driving dynamics overall are really good. It rides and handles pretty well. It's responsive. Probably the biggest complaint that I and my co-driver had about it was that the steering felt a bit light. It seemed a little over boosted.
I was, so the shifter, I think you're right. My complaint about the Elantra Sport sort of mirrors that. Like, yeah, it's very smooth in between gates, but there's little feel from it. At least I didn't feel like there was much mechanical feel to it
Yeah, you don't really feel the gates or anything.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes it can be a little hard to judge which gear you're going into.
Yeah. And the steering I thought was kind of numb too. So like I felt overall the controls are numb.
Did the one you drive? Was it you had so you had a manual?
I did.
So one of the interesting things we found out is that in the automatic, if you get the automatic, or actually the dual clutch transmission, it's you get some selectable drive modes. So you get comfort, touring, and sport modes. And in the sport mode, in the touring and sport modes, they actually tighten up the steering and change the throttle response a little bit. And the manual, you don't get the selectable drive modes.
Well, that's nonsense because I even looked for the flex steer button, the worst named steering system ever. But still, I looked for it.
And I talked to somebody else that actually drove the automatic version, and with the selectable drive modes, in the sport mode in that one, it actually is quite a bit tighter than the manual transmission version.
Okay, so maybe that's the difference and maybe that's smart for them too, because that's where the bulk of the buyers are going to be. But this is sort of an enthusiast car.
Yeah, well, especially the manual transmission version, you would think you would go with the more aggressive tuning on the manual transmission version, but they didn't. They went with what feels like a softer tuning setup, and aside from that, it actually drives really well, and it was quite a bit of fun to drive. It's not quite as powerful as a GTI, but it is very roomy. You've got, the back seat is roomy, and you've got a bunch of cargo space in the back. So it's actually quite practical. And one of the interesting things that they talked about, and they mentioned the same thing back in February at the Chicago Auto Show when they revealed this car, is, from their studies, they found that younger buyers that are buying hatchbacks, they found that those customers actually have a more active lifestyle than most of the people that are actually buying crossovers and utilities. And they're buying the hatchback because they want that flexibility. They want that extra cargo space, but they also want a vehicle that's going to be more fun to drive. I think that's part of why we're seeing a bit of a resurgence in the last couple of years with hatchbacks. You've got the new Cruise hatchback, you've got the Honda bringing the Civic hatchback back, and there's been some the Scion, the former Scion IM,
the IM, yeah.
Yeah, which is now part of the Corolla lineup, being added to the Toyota lineup. So there's definitely some resurgence of hatchbacks, and personally, I like hatchbacks. As we've talked about before.
Who doesn't?
That one. Yeah.
It's sort of it's this one of those things like the van, right? It's just super smart packaging, very very useful.
Right. So, smart people buy compact hatchbacks. That's what you're saying, right?
Yes. And that's why I have a SUV in my driveway.
So it's a really good car. It's not quite a GTI, but it's certainly the most refined Elantra. Probably the most refined Hyundai car yet.
Yeah.
And Hyundai keeps raising the bar, for what they're doing. It's quiet, gets decent performance, and aside from the steering, there really isn't a whole lot else to complain about.
No, and even the complaints, I feel, because I think your experience mirrored mine with the sedan version of basically the same car. It comes down to like how much of a driving enthusiast you are. And even I found that the harder you drove it, the more rewarding it became as well. So it was one of those cars that took a little bit of a feeling out period before I understood how to get the satisfaction I wanted out of it. I think a GTI is a little bit more accessible with giving you that sort of driving enjoyment. Whereas, the Elantra Sport and the Elantra Sport GT, they need to be flogged a little harder before they start to give it back to you. And so that's just learning the car, but also these are subtle things, and they're good cars, and like even the materials that you talk about, they're every bit as good inside as a GTI. I feel, even the hard plastics, they're like Absolutely. Low luster. They're just, I mean, Hyundai's killing it in like every respect. Ergonomics are fantastic. They're really good cars.
Yeah, no, they're fantastic. So definitely worth taking a look at, if you're looking for something that's going to be fun to drive and still has some decent practicality to it.
And, that's a good jumping off point for the next thing, which the Honda Civic Type R, which is a little harder edge, but still sort of in the same ballpark, right? It's a sort of a hot hatch kind of thing, and it's the hottest Civic there is.
Yeah, it's the hottest Civic that's ever been sold in North America. They've had Civic Type Rs in Europe and Japan for some time now. In fact, this is the first time that there's ever been a Honda badged Type R sold in North America. The last time they did a Type R here was back in the mid '90s with the Acura Integra.
I believe that's the TEG Type R, right? It's the slang that the kids use. All right, I'm going to stop.
Well, I wouldn't know since I'm not a kid.
Yeah, me either. I'm just
not familiar with such slang.
Yeah.
The Civic Type R. I'm going to come right out and say it. This is the best, hot sport hatchback you can buy today.
Really? Okay. So what makes it that way? First of all, I guess what separates it from the Civic, and then what makes it the best?
Well, for what separates it from run-of-the-mill Civics, let's run an interview that I did with Rob Keogh, who is the head of product planning for the Civic lineup here in North America, and he will explain all of that good stuff.
All right, we'll get it from the horse's mouth.
Here with Rob Keogh, the Civic product planning manager, and we're here at the media drive for the Civic Type R. And first of all, Rob, tell us what's different. I mean, this is the first time you guys have done a Type R for North America, or even outside of
first Honda branded Type R for North America. Yes.
Yeah, and the Civic Type R has generated quite a reputation over its last couple of generations. First of all, what's different between this Type R and the regular Civics, that the rest of the Civic lineup that's available here in North America?
Okay, so this Civic Type R is based on the hatchback version of the global Civic platform. So the basic platform is the same, but there's a lot of things that are different in terms of the hardware that goes into the car. So we start with the basic body shell of the 5-door Civic platform, but the Type R gets structural adhesives in all the welding joints when it goes in the body shop in the factory to help improve the overall stiffness of the body structure. So we basically added stiffness into the body shell without having to add additional weight. So the whole body shell is actually stiffer for the Type R than a standard 5-door. Then the Type R hardware goes in. The powertrain is unique. The chassis is substantially beefed up. The body kit aero package is unique to Type R as well. So if we start off with a powertrain, we've got a 2-liter turbocharged engine. It's 306 horsepower in U.S. trim, rated on the 91 pump octane that we sell in the States. It's got a 6-speed manual transmission, standard. And although it is front-wheel drive like all the Civic platform, the suspension is beefed up front and rear. It's got a special front hub assembly, front knuckle design, where the steering axis is basically pushed out towards the center line of the wheels. To mitigate torque steer. So even though we have 300 horsepower plus going to the front wheels, you won't get a lot of torque steer when you put your foot down. The wheel and tire package on Type R is a 20-inch wheels, and they're 245 30 series tires all around, so square all around, and they're summer compound only from the factory, so standard summer compound, very sticky tires. Brembo brake package up front, 4-piston calipers, cross-drilled rotors, largest wheel and tire and rotor package on the Civic platform. And actually you cannot put Type R wheels onto a regular Civic. You can't put regular Civic wheels onto a Type R because
the hub's different.
The hub is different. Okay. Yeah, it's actually common with some of the Honda trucks, like similar to the Odyssey bolt pattern. Then the aero kit on the car is substantial. It's designed specifically for the car, and also the body kit. You'll notice like the hood is different, the fender is different. The overall wheelbase is the same as a common Civic platform, but the car is more than an inch wider. You'll notice the front fenders bulge out basically to cover the wider wheel and tire package and the unique suspension layout on the car. As a lower body kit all the way around to improve aerodynamics. There's an aluminum hood on the car, which adds some lightness to the car. Plus, we've got a hood scoop cut in there to get cooling air into the engine bay. We've got the huge rear wing spoiler on the car, which generates downforce for the car. We actually get down, at speed. We actually over 120 miles per hour, actually generating 50, 60 pounds of downforce in the car. And it's not a huge number of downforce, but the main point was that we've removed lift as a factor from the handling of the car. And it is and although it's got a body kit on there for downforce, we also wanted to minimize drag as much as possible. So actually the rear spoiler on this car has got a thinner profile than the previous generation car. Generates more downforce but less drag than the previous generation Type R. So top speed is up just a smidge over the previous car too. Although this car has overall it's a bigger car than the previous generation car, and it's a lot roomier inside. What else can I tell you? Let's go back to the beginning for a moment.
Sure.
The structural adhesives. I mean, obviously, having a good solid structure is crucial to create a great handling car. Because then you're controlling where those four corners are, and then gives you more flexibility in how you tune the wheel motions for both maximum grip and still giving you decent ride quality. How much extra rigidity would you say you got from adding the structural adhesives? Yeah, so over the standard hatchback, it's plus 3% torsional. So the new platform is 38% stiffer torsional than the previous generation car. But just by adding the structural adhesives between the standard 5-door and the Type R, it's another 3% up in torsional rigidity. But when you drive the car, if you've driven even a standard Civic, the platform is pretty solid. It's low and wide. It's very planted, and we just enhance that with the Type R. And to be able to get an extra 3% just with adhesives, that's pretty much minimal, nominal increase in mass. I mean, virtually nothing compared to adding strut tower braces or something. So there's not any additional bracing structure in there that to add any weight or mass to the cars. Yeah. Okay. So powertrain, obviously, for a performance car is important. Any interesting tricks that you guys did with the 2-liter that's in this car versus what's going to be in the new Accord? This is an updated version versus the previous car, and versus similar architecture to what's coming up in the Accord, but the internals of the Type R are significantly beefed up. It's got a lightweight crank train. It's got cooling galleries for the for the pistons, basically to keep cylinder temperatures down to improve combustion efficiency, so making more power out of the car. It's obviously got a larger turbo on this car than we'll see in other 2-liter executions of the car. Large intercooler as well. One of the cool things about it is what we call an iVTEC motor, which means it's got dual variable cam timing, both on intake and exhaust cams, and it does have VTEC. Although this is a different execution of VTEC than what's been done in the past. Previous non-turbocharged VTEC engines, very high revving, where you got dual cam lobes, basically come on in a very high RPM range to get that extra power and surge at the top. The VTEC in this car is actually used on the exhaust side only, and it opens up the exhaust valves in the mid-range to dump more exhaust onto the turbo to help the turbo spool up faster. So it's basically like an anti-lag technology on this car. So you notice when you drive this car, it's really punchy in like the 3,000, 4,000 RPM. It's a very low inertia internals on for single mass flywheel, lightweight, and so it spins up really, and it's very responsive for a turbocharged engine based with the use of those technologies.
Yeah, I noticed driving it, it feels really tractable throughout its power band, but especially in that mid range, which obviously is great on a track car, but I think it's even more important for a car that you can use as a daily driver, because it makes for great drivability when you're stuck in traffic, because you're not always going to be out on the open road, and so having that good drivability all the way through the range, a high revving engine is fun, but not so much fun when you stop.
And I mean, this car is very drivable on the street. If you want to just drive it like a normal commuter car, you can, but it always adds that additional power. And although it doesn't rev like a VTEC motor of the past, it still revs at 7,000 plus RPM. So that's pretty good, RPM out of a turbo motor. So
yeah,
still.
No, it's excellent. And then let's see. The suspension, having the way you guys have set it up with separating the steering axis from the vertical motions of the wheels, that's really done a great job of essentially eliminating torque steer. I mean, except only at like the most extreme cases, and you feel just the slightest pull, and even then it's almost non-existent. Yeah. So can you explain a little bit more about exactly how that works? Yeah.
So basically, it's got a unique front knuckle design. It has a strut suspension, and normally the steering axis is in line with the strut axis on a strut front suspension. In this case, we've taken the front knuckle, or the part that the wheel hub is on, and it's actually extended out into the wheel center itself, and also these wheels, they're 8 or 8.5 inches wide. They've got a 60 millimeter negative offset, which is like a huge negative offset. So basically removing this, although the wheels are very wide and they stick out from the car, they've got a big negative offset to push the center line in, and at the same time we've got the center line for the steering axis on the hub pushed out so that they line up with the center line and wheel with the steering axis. And because you don't have all your power is going through the wheel, nominally through the center of the contact patch. If you've got your steering axis aligned with that, you don't have any torque moment around the steering axis. So that's basically how we virtually eliminated torque steer, which everybody thinks 300 horsepower to a front wheel drive car, it's going to be too much to handle. And actually, once you get this thing rolling out on the track, you almost forget that it's a front wheel drive car.
Yeah, I mean it's really nicely balanced. Everywhere. At the extreme limits, you'll get a bit of understeer, but you can trail the brakes a little bit into a corner and adjust the attitude. So I mean, you can really control it. Put it just about anywhere you want on the track. And really get the most out of the car on the track. Yeah. How much extra weight does that type of suspension layout add to the compared to the standard strut setup?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the specific detail on that part. Obviously, the whole suspension on the Type R is beefed up. We've got thicker anti-roll bars, heavier duty springs. Spring rates are up front and rear, so there is more weight there. But and we've got huge, ventilated rotors, and they're 13.8s up front. I think they're 13.2s in the back. They're we've got a big plate, so there's we had to beef up certain components to deliver the performance, but then to offset that, we did things like the aluminum hood on the car. There's some of the components in the rear suspension, the trailing arms are aluminum instead of iron castings in the standard car. So anywhere that we could where we had to beef something up to handle the power and the dynamic inputs on the car, we tried to offset that with lightweight technologies in other parts of the car.
Okay. And then one other thing that you did for the Type R, you've got the drive modes in there. You've got Comfort, Sport, and Plus R. And for that, you're adjusting the steering setup,
it adjusts
throttle, and the adaptive dampers.
So it depending on whether in Comfort, Sport, or Plus R mode, adjusts the minimum damping force in the damper. So they're always continuously adaptive, but you're setting the baseline of what the minimum force is. So if you go in Comfort mode, it's very comfortable and more soft. Plus R has the least amount of give, and it's really set up for the track. So it adjusts damper settings. It adjusts the amount of power assist that's put into the electric power steering system. So less power assist that's added there. The more feel you get for the car. So that's adjusted on all three levels. Adjust the throttle progression between Comfort and Sport. I think between Sport and Type R, throttle progression is the same. And then it also adjusts the VSA thresholds between Comfort and Sport. When you get to Plus R, that basically removes the traction control from the car. There is still a safety net of VSA and extreme maneuvers, but in a track day environment, you'll almost never feel interference from VSA if you're following a racing line.
Right. So, Rob, thank you very much. It's been great getting a chance to drive the Type R out here in its natural environment on the track, and looking forward to spending some more time with it on the road. Yeah. Thanks for your time.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it. So I got a chance to talk with Rob out in Seattle this week at the Ridge Motorsports Park, which is west of Seattle, south of the Olympic Mountain Range. And we had a chance to spend a couple of hours flogging Type R's on the track there. And if you happen to live in Washington State and you're looking for a place to do some club racing or do some track days, I would definitely go take a look at the Ridge Motorsports Park, and we'll stick a link to it in the show notes for this show. But they have this great track there. It's about 2.5 miles, about 15 turns, lots of elevation change, variety of different kinds of corners, and it was a really good place to exercise the Type R. And the thing about the Type R, all the Type Rs, the intent has always been to make them race cars for the street. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're crazy hardcore. Because this is also very much a car that's very easy to drive on the street, but it's definitely the hardest edge Civic you can get. And what's interesting is that they opted to stick with front wheel drive for this one instead of going 4-wheel drive or all-wheel drive as Ford did with the Focus RS. And this is a lighter car than the Focus RS. It's not quite as powerful as the Focus, but from the driving I did, after a couple of hours on the track, and then took it on a 4.5-hour drive over nearly 200 miles around Washington. There was a pretty good variety of roads that we drove it over, and I would say, this is definitely a much better car than the Focus RS, even though it's not quite as powerful. It feels as quick on the track. this thing was so much fun to drive because it's so well balanced, and going into corners, only at the very limit do you get a little bit of understeer. It's at anything less than 98%, it stays really neutral, and then right at the very edge you start to get a little bit of understeer. And if you trail the brakes a little bit into the corner, you can easily adjust the attitude of the car, bring it back around just a little bit, help it turn in. It's really responsive to the things that you do as a driver. So it's very forgiving, but it does what you want it to do. So you can make it turn in or understeer depending on what you do with the pedals, and it just works really well.
So and that's the thing with the front wheel drive car, is that a lot of people will just worry that it's going to be sort of doomed to understeer, and that's not true. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, no, not if you do it right. And like I said, the way they've got it all set up, you can bring the back end around nicely, with just a little bit of trailing brake into the corners, and then as you hit the apex of a corner, just get on it, and it pulls right out for you, and right on down the straight or into the next corner. It's a lot of fun to drive. It's got great seats in there that hold you in place. Nice steering wheel. And one of the things that they've always done with the Type R's is they always have drawing on their Honda's racing heritage, going back to the 1960s with their Formula One cars. The race cars have always had the red H badge on them, and this is something that for production cars, for road cars, they've only done on the Type R's. So that's what visually sets the Type R's apart. Oh, there's a few other things that set this one apart from regular Civics as well, like that gigantic rear wing and the bulging fenders, but overall, this is a fabulous car, and it's also it's the most affordable in its segment. It's like $34,000 all in. Yeah,
and it'll run with something like a Golf R or a yeah. So easily. I mean that's roughly a $10,000 discount there. Did you try all the different? It seems like there's a bunch of different modes too. Like there's Comfort, Sport, plus R, and there's also a launch mode too.
So they've got the different modes. They've got the R plus or plus R and the Sport mode and the Comfort mode, and you can feel a little bit of difference in the both in the steering effort and in the ride quality. It's got adaptive dampers on it on the Type R, and it tightens it up a little bit in Sport and in Plus R mode. But even in Plus R mode, with it never feels harsh on the road. So I would say that the default mode should probably just be Sport. That's probably the way I would drive it around on a daily basis. But even in Plus R mode, even on some particularly rough roads that we encountered along part of the route, it did just fine. It was not, it didn't punish you, and I didn't have a chance to experience anything like the road that causes the Focuses to get so bouncy here in Michigan, and I'll be curious to try it out here when they get one in the local press fleet. But it's it was very comfortable to drive regardless of which mode it was in. Yeah,
well, I think that Civic in any trim sort of stakes out its own territory in whatever class it's sort of competing in. This is clearly the sort of hot hatch segment version of the Civic versus the economy car segment of the Civic, which is the other trim levels. But it still it does that Honda thing where it sort of transcends the numbers as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It sounds like that's what's going on here too, where numbers wise, even its cost is a little cheaper, so you don't necessarily expect as much out of it. And I think it sounds like you're getting more out of the car than you'd necessarily you'd expect, or that you'd think the price would warrant, given sort of where the competition is.
Yeah, it's both a great value and a great performance car. Even without having all-wheel drive or limited slip differential or any of that, I think it just felt to me like it worked a lot better than the other cars, especially compared to the Focus. I mean, obviously, without the performance all-wheel drive system that the Focus has, you're not going to have like the drift mode that the Focus offers.
But that's kind of a gimmick anyway, though.
Yeah, so I mean, if what you want to do is have a car that you can drive quickly and have fun with on regular roads, and then take it to track days and have a ball with it as well, this is a great choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can take it to the track and take it completely stock, not do anything to it. I mean, the cars we were driving were the same ones we drove on the road. All we did was put on our helmets when we got on the track, and that was it. Everything else was straight out of the box, and it worked great.
Yeah, I mean, Honda is not going to make a car that's sort of out there to mess with drivers. They're I don't know. I have a lot of.
I wouldn't necessarily say that. The last couple of generations of Civic, were not that impressive.
Yeah, I guess, but they've always had that sounded like
they really fixed that with this 10th generation Civic.
See,
it's such a far superior platform to the last couple of Civic generations in every way. I mean, it's more rigid, and what they did with adding the structural adhesives to the Type R, to add a little bit more rigidity to it without having to add any extra weight. All those things, it makes a difference, and it works. It just works really well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that just overall, like the Civic has always, especially the Civic, but it's always had that sort of core bit of Honda-ness. I mean, I had no complaints about the earlier versions other than, like they were loud and they had cheap materials, but that has nothing to do with the R. I do agree though, like they've been off their performance pace for a while. And so it's nice to see them sort of coming back into this realm where, they can credibly play with some of the well-respected, long established names in the segment. So I guess my biggest question is like, if you had the choice, if you had to choose, would you pick the Civic over the Civic Type R over GTI or Golf R?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah. Like, because I find that the Golf and the GTI, the Golf R and the GTI don't look as aggressive as this thing. Yeah, that's true.
From a visual perspective, I think I would probably what I'd really love to do is have all the Type R parts in a regular Civic hatchback body, without all the extra aero bits. I mean, I know that we'd actually lose, some downforce.
Who goes that fast anyway?
Exactly. It wouldn't attract as much attention from the local constabulary.
Right.
So, I think that would be my preference. If I could get, that powertrain, the suspension setup, the brakes and everything, and just the regular body. But even with the Type R bodywork, I think I'd still choose that over the VW. Yeah,
I would love that too, like sort of like a lowercase Type R, right? Like something that doesn't call as much attention to itself. I like that. I don't know. I like the fact that it's a little bit more visceral in some ways, right? It's like it's front wheel drive. It makes you work for it a little bit. All wheel drive everybody has that. It's kind of like a cheap performance boost. It's the human growth hormone for cars.
Yeah, and unlike the Elantra GT, in the Type R, you get some great steering feel. They really, especially in Sport and Plus R modes, the steering really feels good. You've got just the right amount of effort, just the right amount of feedback, and having driven it on the track and really pushed it, you can really feel what's going on at the wheels, and so you can feel when you get right to the limit, you can feel that little bit of the understeer. You can feel when that's starting to happen, and as you adjust between throttle and brake a little bit, you can get it to turn around and get the front end to bite down a little bit more as you get that weight transfer. So it works really well.
All right, so I mean, a ringing endorsement for
absolutely.
the Civic Type R. All right, let's talk about something else again.
Okay.
So this is another one of those PR sort of master strokes. I saw this story sort of just blip out from all of the outlets all at once. I was like, oh, so an embargo lifted, or a piece of PR went out, and so Domino's and Ford have teamed up.
Morning at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah, and I was just like, it just lit up across Twitter. Same story. Everybody had it, and I mean that's the beauty of the PR machine. But Domino's Pizza, here's the first sort of graph of the press release, which I thought was hilarious. Domino's Pizza, the recognized world leader in pizza delivery, and Ford Motor Company are launching an industry-first collaboration to understand the role that self-driving vehicles can play in pizza delivery. So it feels to me like Domino's wrote the Ford press release. But
having been on the other side of this process, it is generally a collaborative process.
Yeah, no, I get it.
And when there's a joint press release like this that goes out, it is a painful process going back and forth between the two sides. Everybody's trying to get their language and their message in there, and it's fun.
Yeah, no, it makes you stabby. Absolutely. Yeah. You're just like, you leave the office looking for somebody to choke to death. But so these are two, like Domino's is a Michigan institution, right? They started in Michigan.
Yeah.
So
right here in Ann Arbor. I mean, they're like 10 minutes away from me here.
Yeah, and so Domino's, they have the little Chevy Sonic based thing.
The Spark.
Spark. Right. One of the small Chevy.
Yeah. They're actually the Domino's DXP.
Right.
And it's Domino's or DPX. Maybe it's DPX.
No, I think it's DXP.
Okay. Well, yeah, they actually call their delivery drivers, and the pizza experts.
Pizza experts. All right, so this is just basically
delivery drivers. They're pizza experts.
I'm gonna finish this podcast. I'm gonna order pizza because we're talking about pizza and it's trigger food for me. So I'm just like, I'm at the point. But they did that with the Chevy vehicle. Basically, it's a vehicle with a built-in warming oven, and now they're teaming up with Ford, and Ford's doing it basically to just get some more data about autonomous driving, and what better way to sort of do that than with a logistical challenge.
Both companies are trying to get some data out of this, so it actually is a collaboration.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree.
Yeah,
sorry.
There's stuff for both sides to learn from this. In terms of trying to understand the user experience, for somebody that's if they're going to order, or whether it's pizza or anything else, how do you interact with an automated delivery vehicle? And so they're for Ford, part of what they want to do is they want to expand the applications of automated vehicles beyond just robo-taxis. So they want to use them for other kinds, for package delivery and food delivery and all kinds of other things. And at the event I was at in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago, Jim Hackett, the new Ford CEO, talked about this, other ways that they could use automated vehicles. Interestingly, though, the car that they're using for this test will not be driven autonomously. It's going to be driven manually.
Yeah, so I thought that was the most interesting wrinkle that's sort of like buried in there. It's like, wait, they're talking about autonomous pizza delivery, and then they're not autonomously delivering pizza.
Right.
Like,
yeah, so for purposes of this test, they're doing it within an area of Ann Arbor. There's one car that they're using, one of Ford's prototype Fusions that they've set up for this, and so there's one particular Domino's store in Ann Arbor. If you happen to call and order your pizza from that store, you may get your pizza delivered. They will ask you if you want to opt in to this test. And if you do, then, it'll get delivered by this car. And because they haven't fully done all the high definition maps of this area yet, for now, they're still having the driver manually drive the car. And what they've done is the windows are heavily tinted. So when a customer comes out to get their pizza, they won't see the driver or the researcher in the front passenger seat that's that's taking notes and collecting all kinds of data. But what they're doing is they're still running all the sensors in the car because they want to see, what it looks like, when somebody walks up and how they interact with the car. So they're recording all this stuff, so they can go back and study it and figure out, okay, what sorts of things do we need to do in terms of how we design our production autonomous car to suit these kinds of needs. Yeah,
well, I think that's going to be the first use case for this stuff once it actually, they sort out the legality and adoption is going to be the logistical users, right? Fleets and, companies that are delivering products and goods and stuff, because that's like a built-in customer base. The part of me hates the fact that it's probably going to cost drivers jobs. Once you get a fleet that can work reliably, that's going to be so much cheaper in some ways than like hiring and sort of dealing with humans. But then again, maybe not. I don't know. It seems that way at this point.
It probably will cost drivers jobs, based on the data they shared about the growth rate of food delivery over the last half dozen years or so. One of the things that they mentioned is that they actually expect, and particularly Domino's growth rate, they expect that even if they eliminate drivers' jobs, they may actually be hiring more people just to build the pizzas, assemble the pizzas.
I don't know. I mean, has their pizza gotten that much better?
I didn't say that. I said they're selling more.
Right. Okay. All right. Fine. I mean, I guess so. Convenience does play a part.
You have to be careful with your language.
Right. I haven't written a press release in a while. But yeah, I mean, so convenience will play a part, though. Like the fact that you could probably order it at sort of later hours than other pizza shops has a lot to do with whether or not I'll actually order sometimes when I have that hankering for late night pizza. And it shows up, right? Like that's cool. Why can't they do this with drones though? Or is that just like drones are probably something that there's just further off in the offing?
They're also experimenting with drones as well. So they're looking at Domino's has a whole division, a research division that actually looks at all kinds of stuff like this. They were actually the first ones. They also have a previous history with Ford, which is part of why they're doing this, because a few years back they integrated their app, their smartphone app with Ford Sync with AppLink. So if you have a Domino's account using the smartphone app, one of the things you can do is you can set up your favorite.
Yeah, I remember that.
There.
Yeah.
And then so if you're in a Ford car with Sync and you can use Sync to trigger the Domino's app and say, okay, pick up my order my favorite pizza from Domino's or whatever the command is using a voice command, and they will automatically do your order and have it ready for you when you get there.
So you still, but like Domino, it's about delivery though. Like I'm not picking up the pizza. You're going to drive it to my house.
Well, no, but I mean, for example, if you're on your way home from work and you pick up some pizza on the way home,
that's true.
And you're in the car already. That was the point. That was the whole idea there is, so you can pick up a pizza on the way home and you don't actually have to call and order it. It does it for you. It does it automatically. It sends you the order.
Well, and I guess as ridiculous as that feels, like that's sort of like that's the future, right? Like that's where we're going. is
we're getting increasingly lazy.
it's not lazy. From a user perspective, you're removing friction. You're streamlining the experience.
Exactly. Yes, that is the problem again. That's the more precise language.
And that's like
taking friction out of the pizza buying experience,
right.
Which is one of the things that Domino's actually attributes to part of their growth is the fact that they've been able to do some of these things that actually take out friction from the purchasing
absolutely. That's like I said,
process.
I say this to my clients, which are nowhere near the scale of Domino's, all the time. It's like, look, if you want people to give you their money, make it easy for them to give you your money or give you their money. So yes, anything you can do to facilitate that, whether it's like robocars that drop the pizza off, like any of that, an app with one-touch ordering. Domino's has actually been quite a leader with a lot of different technologies, not the vehicular side of it apart, but even just their app and the development for that, and the fact that they actually did embrace customer feedback and say, hey, you know what? Like our pizza wasn't what it could have been, so we've made it better. Try it again. All of those things have been a real model in how to evolve an established institution and be nimble and adopt and play with all of this newer technology. So as much as I think it's kind of silly to have pizza, robocar delivered, it's not going to be that silly when you get all your stuff from Amazon the same way.
Oh yeah.
And Domino's also, like, if they want to survive, they need to sell more pizza. And also, if they want to survive, they can then sell off their technology or license their technology. So it's a pretty good win for them if they can figure it out.
Yeah, no, it's everybody needs to, no matter what business you're in, you're going to have to figure out how things are going to evolve for your business going forward. And with especially if it involves any kind of delivery or anything with a customer interaction, it's going to change over time. So might as well start looking at it now and figuring out what you have to do, how you're going to have to adapt your business models to suit that going forward.
Yeah. So when I have my own self-driving car, I want to be able to do what parents in the 80s were able to do. You write the kid a note, you hand him a $10 bill, you send him to the corner store to pick up your cigarettes. Not that I smoke, I just want to see if it'll work. Like, can I send my beer? Right. Can I send my car to go get me my sort of regulated materials that are never ever supposed to be in the hands of a minor? Kind of like that's what people used to do.
Actually, you probably won't even own that car.
Right.
We'll probably just go on your app and or on your phone and say, I need a pack of cigarettes and a 6-pack of beer, and it will just magically appear from somewhere,
right,
and debit your bank account along the way.
The feature's going to be awesome, and apparently I'm going to pick up a smoking
lot of bad habits.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. I'm interested. I wish that I could test this out. Are you close enough to Ann Arbor that you can actually try this out?
I'm not within the delivery zone of that particular Domino's store. I could go, sit in a parking lot there somewhere and order from that store and see what happens.
It's worth a try, right?
But
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other journalists that was at the briefing on Friday, Deanne Durbin from Associated Press, she actually does live near that store, and she was planning to order from there and write about her experience. So once she's had a chance to try this out, maybe we'll get her on the show and have her talk about this.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm assuming the conversation will be like, so how did it go? Well, I got my pizza. Excellent.
Well, this is one of the things that they're going to be looking at is the fact that instead of the delivery person driving up to pulling into your driveway, walking up, taking the pizza out, walking up to your door and handing it to you, you're now going to have to actually walk out to the car and punch in a PIN code on the side of the car to get your pizza out. And so what happens if it's raining out or snowing out? How are people going to react to that? Is that going to be an acceptable solution to customers?
I can.
These are the kinds of things they want to learn. So, as they do this test program, they say, when a customer is selected to participate, they'll be asked to opt in, when they place their order. And if they say yes, then part of it is, afterwards they'll get a call back, and asked to answer some questions for a survey, to see, to get their feedback on the whole process. And, at the same time, they're using the cameras and the LiDAR sensors that are on the car to record everything that's happening, and looking at other things, figuring out, when they punch in their PIN code, what happens if they punch it in wrong? They'll be looking to see how people respond to that, or if they have any problems getting their pizza out of there. Will people, forget, some part of their order in there? Will they forget their sides in there? Things like that, or will they maybe put their phone down, in the warming box in the car and leave that behind? So they're looking at, what sorts of things do we have to put in to make sure that these situations are addressed before the car pulls away. Yeah.
I mean, those are all solvable issues. And they're going to find people are going to do a lot of unexpected things, I think, because that's what always happens is the human factor. So,
yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I could see is like, if I don't have to interact with another person, if the pizza car shows up and it's snowing, fine, I'll go out in the snow. I don't have to talk to anybody. I can get my pizza. It's like, we're good.
And you're just antisocial.
That's exactly right. But yeah, we're doing a podcast. So yeah, well, I hope that they try to roll this out a little bit more. I would love to try this. The closest I can come now is sort of sending somebody else a pizza with the Papa John's, even just the website. So,
well, what you need to do is get a hold of the guys at Newtonomy. I mean, they're based in Boston.
They are.
To team up with your nearest pizza store.
Newtonomy should team up with Santarpio's.
There you go.
Because Santarpio's is like the North End pizza joint. Yeah. Or maybe Santarpio's is over in. I think they're actually in East Boston. I forget. I'm going to just like display the fact that I live in the suburbs right now.
But. I'll get you connected with the guys at Newtonomy, and you can call them and have them hook them up with your pizza joint. And
should absolutely do that. All right, let's answer some.
Possibly go wrong.
Yeah, nothing. And at the end of the day, I can just drive as a pizza delivery guy and make some extra cash. Because people tip them. Yeah. I don't get tips normally. But let's answer some questions because we kind of had one question that actually can sort of tee up next week.
Okay.
So we had a question from the Facebook, just basically quickly asking about buying a vehicle at auction and sort of what our experience or advice might be about that. And so the question is, been shopping for a used car, always read the Carfax if available, and have noticed many low mileage cars, including CPO, have gone through one or more auctions after the first owner. And so this is Paul. His question is, he wants to avoid the cars that have been through multiple owners and look for something leased, serviced, and sold only by a single dealer. So sort of, do we have any advice or guidance on that? And we kind of don't, because we're journalists, and so we don't buy cars that often because we're poor.
I don't know about you, but even before I was a journalist, I didn't buy cars that often. I tend to keep cars. I tend to buy cars new, but then keep them for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Because avoiding car payments and all that sort of thing. Since neither of us are experts in the auto auction area and how that process works, I'm actually going to reach out to some contacts I have at Cox Automotive because they own Manheim Auctions, and they've got a bunch of different business units that are involved in all parts of the automotive retail spectrum, and we'll try and get you an answer for that one for next week, maybe we can just get him on as a guest, and talk about some other things in the automotive retail space as well.
See, and so yes, check back with us next week. Remind us if we forget, because we probably won't, because you're on it and I'm not. The other thing that I found was this treasure trove of Autoblog podcasts. We had set up a Google Voice number for it, or you had, Sam, and all of a sudden I started getting these robocalls to it, so I keep getting emails every day of a 4-second empty voicemail. And so I went to look, and it turns out that people had been leaving us messages that we never answered. So I think that it might be worthwhile to just go dig into that and answer some questions maybe next week.
Sounds like a plan.
So with that, I think we have clobbered episode 37 of Wheelbearings, and we will catch everybody next week with questions from 5 years ago.
All right. Have a good Labor Day weekend, everybody.
Bye.